Eddie, big thanks for having us down today at Matchroom HQ. How is life with you at the moment?
Life is good, really busy. I mean, we're in actually an office that used to be my lounge growing up when I was a kid here at this house. Was my old man's office, and now I've booted him out and he's sort of semi-retired now. So I'm in as the chairman. A lot going on across all sports, particularly boxing, of course, with a couple of really big events coming up. Been a challenging year, of course, with COVID and not having fans, which is something that we sort of live and breathe off, but we're in a good place and sort of coming out the other side, hopefully, and looking forward to the next few weeks ahead.
How happy are you to see sport generally opening up across the world?
Well, opening up across the world, not so much in the UK. I mean, I feel like we're quite a few steps behind. I mean, we've been kind of chasing the fans around the world. We had a show in Gibraltar with Dillian White. We've been in Miami with fans. We've been in Texas with fans. Got 70,000 coming to Canelo Saunders. But over here, we're still behind closed doors. So we're hoping in June that starts to open up. And I think we've learnt a lot, you know, in producing live sport without fans, because normally, Sweet Caroline, people going crazy, the ring walks, the energy, it helps so much in terms of a TV product. So we've learnt a lot, and good to see things opening up. We just need to get a little bit of a move on in the UK.
One of those fights that we are going to see in the next few months is, of course, Canelo against Billy Joe Saunders, as you mentioned there at the beginning, May the 8th. You know, this is probably going to be Billy Joe Saunders' biggest test yet. What, in your opinion, does he have to do to get the better of Canelo?
Not to, you know, that Billy Joe Saunders is over the moon with that, but it's been a great opportunity to not just work with a great fighter, but also give our other fighters opportunities to face him. You know, now this is the fourth fighter that I've worked with that's taken on Canelo Alvarez. Rocky Fielding, Daniel Jacobs, Callum Smith, and now Billy Joe. And it's a hard task. You know, I feel like Billy Joe is probably the most difficult fight for Canelo Alvarez in boxing. You know, he's a world champion. He's 31-0. He's a two-weight world champion. He's a master tactician. He's extremely skillful, and he's got a great mindset as well. You know, he's one of those guys that can produce the performances that are required at the right time. So I think he's got a great chance. He is fighting the pound for pound number one. But next week's going to be interesting, fight week, because do you want to see how Billy Joe plays the old mind games with Canelo Alvarez? I don't know if he'll fall for it. I don't know what Billy's going to do. But I truly believe that on the night, you'll see the best Billy Joe Saunders there can be. And it'll have to be for him to win this fight. But I think when you look at the competition right out at the moment, this is the toughest fight in the division for Canelo Alvarez.
Much of the discussion before the fight has been around how Canelo is the hardest matchup that Billy Joe Saunders has ever come up against and will probably ever come up against. Do you think, on the other hand though, that Billy Joe Saunders is probably the biggest test that Canelo's had, at least in recent years?
I think so, and I think the style of Billy Joe Saunders is very difficult to beat. You know, you've seen Canelo against some good movers in boxing, and he struggled a little bit. It was a long time ago, you know, Trout, Lara, and of course Mayweather, but he's improved a lot since then as well. But Billy's style is very awkward. You know, he's a southpaw, he moves fantastically well, he's very clever. So in the past, a lot of these champions have not wanted to fight Billy Joe Saunders. So he joined up with us just over a year ago. He's craving for the big fights. We've delivered it. He's got it on the biggest stage in boxing, and the rest is over to him. And, you know, like I said, he won't crumble. You know, he's not the kind of guy that's going to walk out in front of 70,000 and just start shaking. He's going to go up the levels, and he'll need to go up the levels. It'll have to be the best performance he's ever given to win this fight, but he's the kind of guy that could produce that under those kind of circumstances.
Saunders is probably the biggest test, like we just said, that Canelo has faced yet. But is there anyone that can currently beat Canelo in his current form on the planet?
I think that's why I say Billy's got the best chance. You know, with the style, with the mindset, he's good. Canelo, you know, really good. I mean, I've watched him probably live again like 4 or 5 times now. Against Callum Smith, that was the one that sort of surprised me the most, because Callum was arguably the number one in the division. He was the Ring Magazine champion. He's 6'4". He's a massive, you know, you looked at them two in the head-to-head and you thought, how can Callum not win this fight? And he struggled to win a round against Canelo Alvarez. And I sort of looked at the fight and just thought, how do you beat him? Well, maybe you do need that movement. Maybe you need that specific style to cause him trouble. But Canelo's very strong, and he's so confident at the moment. You know, I was with him in Vegas last week. he just believes he can beat everybody. And him, Eddie Reynoso, that gym at the moment are flying high, and they're supremely confident going into this fight.
On the topic of Billy Joe Saunders, he's one of, you know, a list of elite British fighters at the moment. You've got Fury, Joshua, Dillian Whyte, Billy Joe Saunders, you know, some of the top fighters in boxing who also happen to be British. What do you attribute to this current success of British boxing?
I think it's just, you know, the history, the importance of the sport in the country, the amateur system. I mean, a lot of those guys that you mentioned come through the British team and the English team. You know, Billy Joe Saunders, outstanding amateur. AJ, Olympic gold medalist. Tyson Fury was in all the GB teams coming up. The only one that wasn't is Dillian Whyte, who came through quite a unique way, really. I just feel like the importance of the sport, the investment from the broadcasters in the sport, there's great money in the sport in the UK, and that's going to encourage people to enter the sport. But I think Britain's always had a great history of fighters, but right now they also have a good history and good standing in the heavyweight division, which is the most glamorous, the most lucrative, and I think while that's happening, the sport will continue to thrive.
If you go back 10, 15 years, I remember, you know, being in college, and we always used to talk about the state of the heavyweight division, say maybe 10, 15 years ago. And there was a dearth of quality, I think, if you go back, say 15, 20 years ago. And now, I mean, look, some of the biggest boxers, like we just said, on the planet are British, and the quality is, you know, it's rich, isn't it? So can you put your finger on why that is, why we seem to be going through this kind of golden generation of British boxing?
I think just, you know, the work that we've put in, the broadcasters have put in over the last 10 years to make the sport as attractive as it is, cycles. You know, I mean, when you look at the heavyweights now, you're right, 10 or 15 years ago, name the British heavyweights. Okay, I know we had Lennox and Bruno, but even if you move a bit closer to that, 6 or 7 years ago, you know, we had David Haye. That was it, really, you know, in the heavyweight division. Now, you've got AJ, you've got Fury, they're both world champions. You've got Dillian Whyte, you know, you've got Derek Chisora, you've got Joe Joyce, you've got Daniel Dubois, you know, and beneath that, you've also got the likes of Fabio Wardley and, you know, other heavyweights as well who are right in the mix. So I just feel like sometimes cycles come along, sometimes golden periods come along, and this is definitely a golden period for British heavyweight boxing.
How much satisfaction does that give you as a promoter of British boxing, someone who's invested their life into it?
A lot, especially in that division, because globally, you know, we're looked upon. We're a small place, aren't we? I mean, you look at the size of our country, you look at the size of America.
I'm from Wales,
you know,
I don't need to be reminded of that.
Well, even more so for you, but you know, I was thinking about the last big Welsh heavyweight as well. Yeah, that's another conversation.
Yeah, I'm like Alan from A Hangover trying to process that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that I think we're in a great place. You know, I think it's just about making great fights. You know, the sport is only as good as the fights we make. And sometimes, you know, you look at the role of YouTubers and, you know, this sort of crazy social media world entering boxing, that puts us under more pressure to make great fights, because if we don't, we'll get overtaken by stuff that's not really boxing. And we've got to be careful about that, but I feel like British boxing's in a great place.
I'm in and ahhing constantly about the Fury Joshua date, set, location, venue. I don't want to get obviously too bogged down in that today. It seems that every single day, or almost 2 or 3 times a day, there's a new update on this set, date, location, venue of the Fury Joshua fight. Many boxing fans are just saying, come on, just announce a date or stop reporting it. Are you kind of bored of the ongoing kind of...
No, but I can imagine how people will start getting bored, and that's something I'm conscious of. Unfortunately, I do 20 interviews a day, and 19 of them are asking about that fight. So unless you just don't do them or don't say anything, which is quite difficult to do in itself, you know, you've got Bob Arum says the deal's done, this is where it's happening, this is the date, and then the next day he says, I haven't spoke to Eddie Hearn for a week, you know, and trying to put pressure on. It's all about games. I feel like I'm a bit of a one-man army going out to try and close this fight. I'm not getting any help from anyone else. It's just sort of all on me. But I'm okay with that because the pressure's on me to make it, and I will make it. You know, we have a site proposal we're all happy with, we've all accepted, we're putting the contracts together for that. Unfortunately, I mean, one of the problems is me, because I'm quite positive and I get asked, how long till the announcement? And I might say, I don't know, 2 weeks. And then we get to 2 weeks, and then my social media goes mad. Right, it's been 2 weeks, what's happening? So, unfortunately, in the world we live in at the moment, it is taking a little bit longer than normal. And, but we are, as I say, we are nearly there.
The problem with social media as well is that someone's bookmarked that
100%.
Someone's liked that tweet.
And I should know better. But I'm trying to give you the updates. I'm being honest. You know, if you ask me now, how long till the announcement, I would say early next week. But then early next week comes and there's no announcement and it's what's going on. So I am conscious that I don't want to bore people with it. We can't do any more than we're doing. So stand by.
In terms of the future of British boxing, if we go back to that for a moment, we've discussed the biggest names in British boxing, but in terms of the future, who are some names that we may not be aware of publicly who you are predicting to be big stars of the future? I
mean, a lot of them you are aware of. You know, I think when you look at the next level of stars coming through, you're talking about, I mean, you can't even say stars or prospects. You've got like Lawrence Okoli, just won the world title, Joshua Buatsi, Joe Caldina, Cash Farouk, you know, Anthony Fowler, like Ted Cheeseman, who's involved in War After War. I think the one right now that kind of stands out is Conor Ben. You know, he's the guy that he's hitting big numbers. He's the guy that's knocking everybody out. He's the guy that's giving crazy interviews after the fight. And outstanding, again, the prospect's probably the wrong word, but he's probably the guy right now that is at the forefront of British boxing. But loads of guys underneath those guys coming through, and there's a constant swell and evolvement of young fighters coming through, especially as we approach the Olympic cycle. You know, now you're about to get the next wave of the GB fighters. All those names that I mentioned, Fowler, Caldina, Josh Kelly, Joshua Buatsi, Lawrence Okoli, they're all Olympians from Rio. So now you've got the Olympians from Tokyo that will be turning pro later this year, and that'll be the next cycle of stars coming through. So the conveyor belt never stops evolving. So it's not that, you know, oh, will we stop producing stars? No, we won't. But obviously some cycles will be better than others.
Fury, Joshua, biggest names in world boxing, not just in the heavyweight division, both British as well. What needs to happen to ensure that British boxing remains at the very top?
Just making big fights. Like, the sport is massive, but we see, you know, if we do an average show, the interest is average. The viewing figures are average. If we put on a barnstormer, does huge numbers. So we're all pretty comfortable of where we are. We understand the process. We understand better than anyone what the fans want. We have a great relationship with them, sometimes love and hate, but we understand what they want. We're fans. I'm a fight fan. I don't want to sit there and watch a shit fight. I want to sit there and watch an absolute humdinger, you know, one that just gets my blood pumping all around my body. So I understand the sport, I understand the product, and you know, I think British boxing's in a great place. Boxing
in general has come under quite a bit of criticism recently from those in the MMA world. Dana White, the UFC president, said that boxing was in a bad place following the recent success of Jake Paul. I was wondering if you had a kind of take or thought on that remark.
The UFC have done a tremendous job. I mean, I say to a lot of our guys in this office, watch what they're doing, you know, sometimes copy it. And I even said that to Dana. I saw him last week when I saw Billy Joe Saunders in Vegas, and they do an amazing job. They have a unique model where they control the sport, basically. You know, you sit in this UFC world, you sign a contract, and you have to fight really who you're told to fight until you get to the size that they don't really want you to get to, like a Conor McGregor, where you're actually calling the shots. He doesn't really always understand the politics, the history of boxing, and it would frustrate the life out of him. You know, he keeps talking about going into boxing, and I sort of say to him, mate, you have no idea. Like, it's not, in his world, it's, right, okay, you're fighting on June 20th against him. See you later. You know, here, it's lawyers, it's managers, it's promoters, it's networks, it's egos, it's, you know, it's negotiation on each fight. And it's very, very difficult. Boxing is bigger than MMA, okay? Globally. It has more history, it has more credibility, but UFC is red hot. And it's red hot because the best are fighting the best, because not that they don't have any choice, but that's what they signed up to do in this system. So I'm jealous of that system. You know, I'd love to be in a spot where I just say, right, you're fighting him, your money's set within your contract you signed 2 years ago, good luck, see you there. But it doesn't always work like that. But I feel like the big fights will always generally outweigh the big MMA fights. But there needs to be more of them. And, you know, the Triller stuff and the Jake Paul stuff, does that show how bad boxing is? Not really. It shows that there's money to be made in boxing if there's the interest. I mean, a lot of his MMA guys are clamouring to fight in boxing because Ben Askren made more than he probably made in his whole career, you know, fighting Jake Paul, his MMA career. So the money is much bigger in boxing than it is in MMA, full stop. But MMA and, well, the UFC is red hot, and it's a fantastic business and a great brand.
Conor McGregor recently tweeted that the UFC was better than, and his quotes, blogger jackass boxing. But I found that to be a bit rich personally, because it wasn't so long ago that he was actually in the ring with Floyd Mayweather. Do you think there's a bit of hypocrisy?
I think Jake Paul's just winding people up. You know, I mean, I've worked with Jake Paul. I did a fight with him. And if I didn't know Jake Paul, I would think he's the biggest bellend I've ever seen. And he's not everyone's cup of tea, but he's a very smart guy. He can fight a little bit, by the way. He's not going to, you know, threaten to win titles. He's going through the hard sparring. He's going through, you know, the training. And he's an outstanding content creator. He's a good promoter. He knows how to build interest. And he's winding everyone up. I mean, he's going to get slapped sooner or later. Not in the ring, well, in the ring as well, but also in the street somewhere, because guys like Daniel Cormier, you know, these kind of guys, sooner or later, they're just going to, before he knows it, he's going to be asleep, you know? So, but that's the risk you take when you want to press the wrong buttons of people. So, I think that a lot of people, I feel like in boxing and fight sports, a lot of people that have been through the tough times, the tough yards to get to where they got to. Conor McGregor's one of them, you know, comes from a tough upbringing in Dublin, worked his nuts off to get to where he is. He looks at these guys, some fighters look at these guys and go, hang on a minute, you're making millions of dollars, you've just bowled straight in. But that's because they've built a value. That's because they've built a following. They haven't just rocked up off the street and gone, oh, I'll just chance my arm at boxing, give me a couple of $1 million. They've built 20 million YouTube subscribers. You know, they've been creating content all their life. So that following has given them the opportunity to go into pretty much anything they want. I mean, some of them are now creating songs, aren't they? You know, you've got KSI, you've got Jake Paul. You know, these guys are creating rap songs and collaborating with some of the biggest names in music. So, but you don't get a musician saying, well, hang on a minute, who's this guy? This YouTuber's just walked in and taken all our money. But that's a lot of the feeling of the fight community, is that we've worked hard to get to this point and you haven't. It's life, you know. He's built the right to be able to do what he wants because he has the value.
Ryan Garcia, a close kind of confidant, I think you could say, of Jake Paul, told me that, you know, it's probably a lot of bitterness on the part of many boxers that they aren't promoting themselves as well as Jake Paul is. And then you've got the, you know, some of the biggest boxers in history like Mike Tyson saying that, well, boxing needs these exhibition fights in order to remain kind of competitive when you've got a kind of swashbuckling promotion like the UFC prepared to do absolutely anything to kind of stay relevant. Is that what you...
I just feel that when you look at the UFC, it's the best fighting the best, right? So and that's what we need in boxing. I don't like the exhibition stuff. You know, I feel that I don't want to see a great fight, a great who's, you know, and they're 60 years old and like, I don't want to see Mike Tyson in the ring. You know, I saw him at our show in Miami. Like, for me, he shouldn't be in the ring fighting. So I don't think that's the answer for boxing. What's the answer? If we're going to say the UFC model's great, we need to do the same. You know, you need to see Fury against AJ. You need to see Errol Spence against Terence Crawford. You know, you need to see Devin Haney against Ryan Garcia. You need to see all these, and then we'll surpass the UFC and MMA because we have the history, we have the credibility. And everybody knows boxing. Not everybody knows MMA. Everybody knows boxing. And, you know, I get the arguments on both sides. I did KSI against Logan Paul, so I can't say too much. But I knew what I was doing. I enjoyed the experience. It's not something that I want to do again and again. Will I do it in the future? Maybe. But it does bring new eyeballs to the sport. My idea on that show was have a couple of world championship fights beneath that so that audience can at least witness real boxing. Because KSI... Logan Paul, that wasn't real boxing. It was just a 50-50 fight between two guys that had trained for 12 weeks to have a fight. But you look at like Logan Paul against Floyd Mayweather, what is that? I mean, that's awful. One of the best fighters of all time against a 0-1 YouTuber. That's embarrassing. Floyd Mayweather, actually, he don't care about embarrassing because he just wants the money, right? And you can't knock him for that either. But he should be. You know, if he's got any responsibility to the sport. And the fighters are the ones that should have more responsibilities than the promoters. You know, we've got terrible reputations. You know, you might like us, you might not. We are there to make money for the fighters, make money for the business, you know, and produce big shows. But you would have thought that someone like Floyd would look at it and go, can't get away with fighting Logan Paul. But he's also going, give me 100 million and we're all sweet.
When you balance the two up, it's a bit of a...
But that's why, when I did KSI Logan Paul, look, and I think one of them got upset, I said, neither guy can fight, right? They can fight a little bit, but you could match them 10 times, you'd probably get 10 different results. On what planet does a 0 and 1 YouTuber even win like a second of a round against one of the greatest fighters of all time, you know? So I guess all these things are circuses, and I guess circuses sell.
It's probably the style that Mayweather has as well. He's so evasive. You know, he didn't land a lot on Conor McGregor, but because he was so evasive, he was able to kind of stretch that fight out. And
he carried that fight. I mean, I was there, you know. Yeah. I mean, he could have ended that fight whenever he wanted to, you know. And I was sitting there, it was funny, because I was sitting there, that fight, and there was a guy next to me who'd flown in from, can't remember where it was, like Bahrain or something like that. He'd obviously paid like more than a small house for his seat next to me. And he was like, after about 5 or 6 rounds, he was going, I think Conor's gonna do it. And I'm like looking at him thinking, oh my God, you really have been taken in by, you know. So Floyd's not going to lose. You know, Floyd couldn't have lost to McGregor in a million years. He certainly ain't going to lose to Logan Paul. But listen, you know, they're out there making their money, and if people are prepared to watch, good luck to them.
Finally, if we go back to Billy Joe Saunders just for a second, obviously he was in the background of Tyson Fury's Instagram stories yesterday. Fury had a few choice words for you, and Matchroom in general said you weren't doing enough to promote people outside of Canelo and Saunders in particular. Do you care about that?
I do care, because you know, I've worked really hard to get Billy this opportunity. And I like Billy Joe Saunders, and if he wins, I'd be delighted for him. I also represent the pound for pound #1 in the fight, which is Canelo Alvarez, which of course, you know, there's a lot of noise around him as well. I don't know whether it's a little tactic from Billy, you know, he's very clever on these little things, like, and it's probably winding him up, so he's like back against the wall mentality. I've spent a long time defending Billy Joe over the last sort of year and a half, and he joined us so that we would make him the best and biggest fights, and I've done that as well. So I feel like I've done a great job. He's up against it. He's up against 65,000, whatever it will be, Canelo fans at the AT&T Stadium. But he joined Matchroom so that we would get him the biggest fights, and we've done it. So this is a life-changing opportunity for him. He says in a lot of his interviews, he don't care about the money. Don't believe that. I got him a bucket load of money for this fight. We've done our job. We'll make sure everything's fair. We'll make sure every word that's in that contract is honoured. And it's over to him. You know, Tyson Fury will be there. I'm sure we'll have some words as well. But those two are a good pair, you know. Like, that's going to help Billy in this fight, having Tyson there. So this is the moment of Billy Joe Saunders' career. He's got it. It's been delivered for him. Now it's over to him to go and make history.